Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel, Stamp Cat Stamps, where I share with you the things that I learned from my stamp collection. Welcome to my final episode of the Quebec City Xtreme Philately series. I hope you've been enjoying the videos so far. We're gonna kick things off right away looking at this stamp. This one is possibly my favorite stamp out of the entire Quebec City bunch. I really like the picture on it, and I love just how huge this stamp is. It's 48 by 30 millimeters. It was issued in 1972 with the theme of urban centers, along with this similar $1 stamp, which shows the skyline of the city of Vancouver. These two stamps were all a part of Canada's definitive stamps that were used between 1972 and 1977. All of them were designed by the graphic artist Reinhard Dareth. In contrast to the two higher value stamps, which show cityscapes, the lower rate definitives show scenes from Canada's variety of natural landscapes. So I went searching for this exact view of the skyline of Quebec City. I wandered away from the chateau and up a nearby hill. Turns out the view from this stamp is from the nearby Parc du Bastion de la Reine. It's a perfect place to bring a blanket and a picnic lunch and take in the views. But what's also interesting to see is if you turn around, you'll see another structure right behind you, and that is the Citadel of Quebec. Here's another view of the Citadel from across the river. These two stamps show the same view but in different rates. The 12-cent stamp was issued in 1930 and the 13-cent stamp in 1932 after a rate change. Here, come with me, I'm going to show you something. So I've infiltrated my parents' house where my dad has a much more extensive stamp collection than I do, and I'm going to show you one of the covers that he has. It has the Quebec Citadel stamp on it, which can give us an idea of how the stamp could be used as actual postage. Now, this cover has a lot of stuff going on, but we'll try to have a look at each part of it. First of all, we can see that this is a first flight cover, a philatelic item created to commemorate the first flight between the towns of Reine and Camsell River, which are both in the Northwest Territories. We can see from the postmark that the flight took place on December 5th in 1933. So now my dad will point out the journey that this cover took on our map here. So first, we're gonna focus on Northwest Territories.
We start at Reine, and nowadays Yellowknife is the largest town in the territories, but this cover is from before the days when Yellowknife was inhabited, so Reine would have been the principal community in the area. From here, the flight went north, following the Camsell River to approximately its mouth at Great Bear Lake, where the post office of Camsell River was located, a new post office. From there was a continuation run, and we're not sure whether or not on this particular flight the flight continued, but it could have continued. It says Port Radium now, but in the olden days it was called Cameron Bay before being renamed Port Radium. Both these towns, I think, are now ghost towns. The mines have been worked out, or there's no more demand for the minerals, and so they closed down and everybody left. Once the plane was out here, it would have flown back. The distribution center for mail from the Reine area was Fort McMurray down here in Alberta. Whether the plane could make it all that way on a tank of gas or whether it had to refuel, we don't know, but we suspect that the cover would have come back from Camsell River to Fort McMurray, and then it would go to places in the rest of Canada depending on the address. And the cover does have a postmark from Edmonton indicating that at that point it had reached its destination.
The postage on this cover includes a 5-cent airmail stamp issued in 1930. The cost of airmail at the time of this cover was actually 6 cents due to a 1-cent war tax added in 1931. A 1930s King George V arch definitive with a 3-cent overprint because that 1-cent war tax was also added to the domestic postage rates as well. An 1895 Queen Victoria postal stationery envelope. On postal stationery, the stamp is essentially built into the envelope and counts as valid postage. And finally, our 1930 12-cent Quebec Citadel stamp. The most common way that I've seen the 12 and 13-cent stamp used was for registered mail in the 1930s. Registered mail was a special designation used for mail with important contents, where the sender received a notice of proof that the mail was delivered to its final destination. The cost for registered mail was 10 cents at the time. After comparing these stamps with the postage rates of 1933, I was left wondering, why is there so much postage on this envelope? In order to make a first flight cover, collectors could mail a pre-addressed and pre-stamped envelope to the post office of origin that covered the airmail fee. Even with registration, this cover should only have cost 16 cents to send. Maybe the collector just wanted to make a more interesting philatelic item? Maybe it was stuffed with other covers and exceeded the weight limit? Maybe there was some sort of extra postage fee that I'm not aware of? I did find other first flight covers just like this one that seemed to get through the postal system okay with just the regular airmail rate. One of them was actually another cover from the exact same collector for the exact same flight. So we can rule out the theory that maybe he just didn't know how much it would cost. What do you guys think? Any other theories on why there's so much extra postage on here? Tell me your theories in the comment section. In any case, I'm glad this cover has a large variety, because really, without the Quebec Citadel stamp, it would not have even made it onto this episode. The Citadel of Quebec sits atop Cape Diamond. It got its name from the explorer Jacques Cartier in 1535. I recently got this postcard from my local antique shop because I recognize this 1908 stamp of Cartier and Champlain on the back. The stamp corner is a little bit chewed up, but here it is. Cartier was the first European to explore the St. Lawrence River in the 1500s. He's actually kind of responsible for naming this country Canada, although it's a little bit of a misnomer. While he was exploring the region, he asked some indigenous groups, what is the name of this place? And they told him Canada, which was an indigenous word that actually meant village. So he then just started referring to this entire land as Canada, which means that really our entire country is named village. During one of his voyages, Cartier named this hill Cape Diamond because he claimed to have found treasure here. He found gold, diamonds, and precious minerals that he had loaded onto a ship and sent back to France. However, once they were analyzed by specialists, they turned out just to be iron pyrite and quartz instead of actual gold and diamonds. And I think everyone kind of made fun of him after that. Because of his mistake, there is now apparently a saying in France, which is faux comme un diamant du Canada, which means fake as a Canadian diamond. Well, that's a little mean, but I do want you to know that years later in the 90s, actual diamonds were discovered in Canada in mines in the Northwest Territories. So a Canadian diamond is not necessarily fake anymore. You were right, Cartier, just the wrong place and the wrong time. Back to the Citadel. It was built between 1820 and 1850s by the British. Wait, up until now, everyone that we've talked about has been French. So why are we suddenly talking about the British now? Well, let me tell you about the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. In the year 1756, war broke out between Britain and France, a war that later became known as the 7 Years' War. And recall that at this time in history, the United States and Canada didn't exist as countries yet. People living in these areas were either British colonists, French colonists, or indigenous people. The 7 Years' War between Britain and France not only affected their countries and their allies in Europe, but their colonies around the world as well. Colonies in India and North America were also at war with each other. As for the events that happened here in North America, by 1759, the British forces had gained control of Louisbourg in Nova Scotia. This gave them the access they needed to sail down the St. Lawrence River. The British, led by General James Wolfe, sailed up the St. Lawrence and then set up camps on the island of Orleans and Point Levis. They then attempted to attack the city from the Levis side, but as you know from my last video, the city walls facing the river have been pretty heavily fortified, and the French were safe behind their walls. The British also tried an attack near Montmorency Falls east of the city, but they were again rebuffed by the French. The British had to try something different to get around the city's strong defenses. So, under the cover of darkness, in the early morning of September 13th, Wolfe was able to drift a few of his boats to a place west of the city and landed at Anse-au-Foulon. And what happened next is kind of crazy, because they then climbed up a cliff in the dark. And they even dragged 2 cannons up the hill with them and made it to the Plains of Abraham. This feat was pretty impressive to me because I explored a bit of a pathway that now connects the lower part of the city to the east ends of the Plains of Abraham. You get to walk along the edge of Cape Diamond and pass beneath the walls of the Citadel. This is the Governors Promenade. 310 steps. Let's do this. So this walk goes around the whole wall. Climbing the steep hill was enough work for me, and that was in broad daylight with a nice wooden staircase. Obviously, the decision to climb up this cliff in the dark was really risky for Wolfe. If they had been discovered, the British would have been defenseless against any attack from French soldiers at the top of the cliff. Once they got to the top, the British army was faced by the French led by Louis-Joseph Montcalm. He decided to attack right away, but unfortunately that decision was too hasty. The British army was able to defeat the French soldiers, and the battle was over in 15 minutes. At the end of the 7 Years' War, France ended up giving a lot of its colonies to the British, including what is now Quebec. So if all of this was happening in the 1700s, why was this citadel not built until the 1820s? Well, after their victory at the Plains of Abraham, the new British general did send a request to build a better fortress here, but the request was deemed too costly. Then later on, during the American Revolution, Benedict Arnold and Richard Montgomery attacked Quebec City again, and then years later after that, tensions again rose with the Americans during the War of 1812, and the British decided, okay, maybe we do need a really strong fort here, and agreed to build this citadel, which we now see today. But since they built it, it's never been attacked. So a few interesting things about the Citadel now. It's an active military base, home to the Royal 22nd Regiment, sometimes called the Vendus, which is a linguistic corruption when English people like me try to say Vendue. The 22nd is the only Francophone regiment in the regular Canadian forces. It was created during World War I for French Canadians who wanted to enlist. The Royal 22nd Regiment also does a changing of the guard ceremony, and this ceremony includes participation by a goat, their mascot named Batisse. Batisse also comes out with the regiment in full dress complete with gold horns and a blue robe with the regiment's crest. The original Batisse was a gift from Queen Elizabeth, and all of the goats that we see in the ceremony today are all named Batisse, and they are all still descended from this original goat. The Citadel has seen many important visitors over the years, including kings, queens, and presidents.
You know they tried to shoot the Americans here?
Lady, why you gotta bring that up? Also, they attacked us! The Citadel also hosted Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Canada's Prime Minister Mackenzie King. They stayed at the Citadel for its safety and then held meetings in the nearby Chateau Frontenac to discuss the Allies' plans for invasion of France, an event that we now refer to as D-Day. Anyway, that's all that I have to share with you about the Citadel of Quebec. It's clearly an important part of the history of Quebec, and today the mixture of cultures there is very evident. Some French, some British, and some simply Canadian. I hope you've enjoyed this series on exploring Quebec City through stamps. Stay tuned for more videos about the random things that I learned from my stamp collection. As always, stay safe and stay curious. Bye!